Hello students, we are learning exception handling in Java, and while learning exception handling there is always one question asked in interviews. What is checked exception and what is unchecked exception? Or what is the difference between checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions? In this video, we are going to talk about what is checked exceptions and what is unchecked exception. We are also going to talk about difference between checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. So please watch this video till the end and put your comment at the end of video. Hello friends, we have already learned a lot of things on exception handling. Right from the beginning, we have learned how to use a try and catch blocks, what is a finally block, how to throw the exception, what is use of throws clause, and what are differences between errors and exceptions. In this video, we are going to talk about an important topic, difference between checked and unchecked exception. Let us try to understand. We have learned exception handling with the help of throwable class. We have learned throwable is a parent class for all errors and exception handling. In this video, we are going to focus only about exceptions and we are going to talk about difference between checked and unchecked exceptions. There are two types of exceptions. First one is unchecked exception. In this case, it is not mandatory that programmer must handle these exceptions. Exception handling is totally optional. If programmer expects to handle the exception, programmer can handle the exception. If programmer is not interested in handling exception, programmer can skip this. But in this case, there is a possibility of exception and the program will get crashed. If exception occurs, then program will behave abnormally or program will totally crash. To avoid this, it is recommended to handle those exceptions. But in case of unchecked exceptions, it is not compulsory for programmer to handle the exceptions because these exceptions are unknown at the time of developing the program. The second type of exception is checked exception. These exceptions are compulsory to handle. Programmer must handle checked exceptions while typing the program, otherwise compiler will give error that exception handling is mandatory or these are checked exceptions. So there must be a try block and there must be a catch block that will support to the try block with a particular exception. Otherwise, you cannot run the program. In this case, what is possible exception is already known and therefore exception handling part is compulsory. In previous video, we have seen how to postpone the exception handling. If you haven't watched our previous video, please go and watch this video and see how can we postpone the exception handling and how it will generate checked exception. Because of the postponing exception handling, checked exceptions are created and then it becomes compulsory to the programmer to handle those exceptions. So you can watch this video so that you can understand how to use throws class and how checked exceptions are already created. Let us try to understand differences between unchecked exceptions and checked exception. Unchecked exception, these are optional to handle. It is not mandatory to handle these exceptions. So exception handling is not mandatory. But in case of checked exception, exception handling is mandatory as these exceptions are already known. Second difference, unchecked exception generates a runtime exception. So unchecked exceptions, when they occurs, they are always at runtime. But in case of checked exception, these are compile time exceptions. They have to be handled before compilation. Otherwise, compiler will not allow you to compile the program and to run the program. So your .class file will not be generated unless you are handling all checked exceptions. In other words, we can say checked exceptions creates compulsion on a programmer for exception handling. All unchecked exceptions are unknown exception. Programmer has to find out what are possible exceptions. Programmer has to think about it. Then only it is possible to handle unchecked exceptions. But in case of checked exceptions, these are known exceptions. Whatever classes you have imported or whatever methods you are going to call, accordingly, the programmer who has created those methods have declared that these are possible exceptions, and therefore checked exceptions are known. These are already declared by using throws clause in previous class, and it has to be handled. So unchecked exceptions are unknown. It has to be predicted by the programmer, whereas checked exceptions are known and it is mandatory to handle those exceptions. The last difference, unchecked exception are first time occurrence. It is first time occurrence and it leads to program crash when it occurs. So when you are typing a program, you don't know what are the possible exceptions if it is not predefined, or if programmer is not thinking about the exception. When the program is executed first time, at that time exception occurs, and that occurrence leads to abnormal behavior of program. But in case of checked exceptions, exception handling is already postponed by first level of programmer, and therefore it is already known to first level programmer that these are possible exceptions at next level, and therefore handling of this exception becomes compulsory. So unchecked exception always occurs sometimes, always occurs first time, and when it occurs, programmer get crashed. But in case of checked exception, as already it is known what are possible exception, unless programmer is handling the exception, programmer will not execute. So there is a less possibility of program getting crashed in case of checked exceptions. So these are differences between unchecked exceptions and checked exceptions. I hope now the concept of checked and unchecked exception and their differences are clear to all of you. If you have got any value from this video, put a comment below this video and let me know what you learned from checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. You have to also give your preference, what you like, checked exceptions or unchecked exceptions. If you haven't subscribed my channel yet, please subscribe my channel and click on bell icon so that you will get notifications about my next videos. Thank you very much for watching my video.